Welcome, everyone, back to the Best of the Best Countdown series, a very special Happy Halloween edition of the episode. This is episode number 9 of this series. Of course, I sound like a robot, but I am Zach, your host here on the Yo Bro Nation YouTube channel. Tomorrow's Halloween. Happy Halloween to everybody. Hope y'all are going to go have safe trick-or-treating, all that good stuff. I have plans for sure for Halloween. What a month it's been so far, guys. Second to last day of the month. It's been a good month. We've had the Countdown series. That will finish up tomorrow with the finale. It's a secret. Not going to tell you guys what it is. Also, my Halloween special is tomorrow night at 5 p.m. I hope you guys really go check that out. Excuse me, I'm about to get the hiccups. But man, oh man, oh man. We've had Hell in a Cell. We've had a Halloween Countdown series. We've reviewed a ton of movies this month. We've had a retro rewind review. We've had a retro movie review. We've had all sorts of good stuff this month, and it has really been a really fantastic month. But it's not over yet. We still got today, and we got tomorrow. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. We are doing the top 10 spooky, creepy wrestling characters in wrestling. And it's pretty simple. If they had any sort of an element of something you could consider creepy, they basically qualify. There wasn't actually a lot of options out there, if I'm being honest, but I wanted something Halloween related. So, with that being said, if I could actually speak, let's go ahead and let's jump into this. We'll start with number 10. Number 10. Not a lot of people are going to know this one. The Great Kabuki. The Great Kabuki, though, was a mainstay in the Dallas area in the 70s in the WCCW. He beat legends like Jack Briscoe and the Von Erichs, Gary and Kerry. Really well known. But like I said, not a lot of people know who he was. He was, of course, a Japanese wrestler, very well skilled in the art of, I believe it was Taekwondo, martial arts in general. The Great Kabuki. I have gone back and I have watched and I've heard the name, but a lot of people get him, for weird reasons, some people get him confused with the Great Muta, who I could have probably threw on this list at a point, but I chose not to. But yeah, the Great Kabuki, not a lot to say. I'm not super familiar with him, but I do know his in-ring style was very aggressive, and he was considered a legend in the Dallas area. Let's just go ahead and let's jump on here, all right? Let's just go straight to number 9. At number 9, I know people know this, though. Papa Shango, a.k.a. The Godfather. Papa Shango, of course, the voodoo thing back in the early 90s. Very creepy. He was supposed to be like a voodoo ghost-like figure. Never really won championships, but he definitely had a creepy presence. He was involved in a big angle involving Hulk Hogan and Sid Justice and the Ultimate Warrior in 91 following WrestleMania. Of course, though, he would go on to become Kamala. Papa Shango, though, good in-ring worker, enjoyed by many, many people. And he is definitely one of the more memorable characters of the early 90s. Just something about that aura that he had, walking around with his big old stick that was smoke, and just, I don't know, because I'm into the creepy shit. I'm into, voodoo and hoodoo and all that stuff, in the South. It was interesting to me. He had some decent matches, like I said, going on after that, but he kind of missed his cue, kind of derailed his whatever push he probably would have had. Had a couple, I think he did have a really memorable match with The Undertaker as well. So, but who didn't have a great match with The Undertaker at that time? You know? So, moving on to number 8. Number 8. Now, this is definitely one to remember. Most people remember Doink the Clown for his silliness whenever he had Dink, or at the Survivor Series in 92 when, or was it 93? Yeah, maybe 93. When him and Dink and all the other little clowns took on Jerry Lawler. But not a lot of people remember there was a point where Doink the Clown was evil. And he was a very evil individual. Going back and watching, yes, he still had his silly elements, you know, the laughing and all that stuff, but my God, this man was ruthless. He was a ruthless individual. And I don't know, I personally preferred evil Doink over funny Doink. Now, of course, Doink was played by multiple different people. You can go look that up for yourselves. I ain't giving you all that information, but evil Doink, he was, what's the word I'm looking for? Nefarious, right? He was just calculating and stuff, and he picked up some big wins during his time. You'll notice a trend. A lot of the people on this list never really won a lot of championships. He was one of those, but there was just something about his character that stood out amongst, you know, a lot of others. But so, yeah, Doink the Clown in the 90s, when he was actually evil, I don't know, there was something about that I just loved, and that's why I threw him onto the list. So let's go ahead, let's jump to number 7. And this man is, he's on here for more than just being a wrestler, but the impact that he had on the business and kind of how it would lead to things later on. Interesting, though. But I couldn't do this list without this man, Kevin Sullivan, who from his independent days up till him being the booker / wrestler in WCW, the Taskmaster, as a part of the Dungeon of Doom. Man, Kevin Sullivan, say what you will, but my God, Kevin Sullivan was a fantastic wrestler. He really was. He was a fantastic wrestler. Excuse me. Him and Nancy Benoit, before she was Nancy Benoit, were a real-life husband and wife. And he got her into the business. That's why we had Nancy Benoit when she was woman, right? She was woman. But she was his manager before that. And then she came into WCW with him. And that built up that great rivalry with him and Chris Benoit, the Dungeon of Doom and the Four Horsemen. You got stuff like that out of it. And the man, he won championships wherever he was. He was a man's wrestler. Now, he's more than weird, right? He was a very weird individual. But he was still very enjoyable to watch. Honestly, I enjoyed watching him. And then, not only from the wrestling side, he was also, oh my goodness, he was a fantastic booker. During his time as the booker, he was the head booker of WCW for quite a long time, and then Kevin Nash took over. But he almost booked himself into being not married anymore. But his character, the Taskmaster, Kevin Sullivan, he was a ruthless, vile individual. He was evil. So he put the Dungeon of Doom together to take on the immortal Hulk Hogan, which is all to get Hulk over. But he knew what was good for business, right? As a booker. That was an interesting thing, man. I remember watching these old WCW pay-per-views and watching the old Nitros and him in these dark places with the face makeup. When I first started, finding these old videotapes, I was like, God, he's quite creepy. And I did. I legit felt creepy. Now it's like just the genius. That was Kevin Sullivan. That he was able to do as the Taskmaster. It was enjoyable. It was enjoyable. So, he's another highly underappreciated character. Speaking of underappreciated characters. Alrighty, let's talk about number 6. And this man who won many championships in the Deep South and Mid-South wrestling and other places that he was. This man, at points, was the most over babyface. And at other points, was the most hated of wrestlers. But no matter what, he was the Snake. And I'm talking about Jake the Snake Roberts. You can't really talk about Jake. You can't really do this list without talking about Jake. Was Jake considered a supernatural character? No. Excuse me. But he was involved with many different characters. He had a match with The Undertaker. He involved himself with other supernatural beings at points. But there was something about this man when he was a heel that you couldn't help but just kind of, I don't know, when he was a heel, you felt legit fear of this man. You did. You felt legit fear of this man. And him, something about carrying around that bag with that snake, almost like he could hear it in his head. He knew what the snake was thinking, how he would use biblical references at times. Even when he got older and he would be a face, he would use those biblical references. The man was a fantastic wrestler. Like I said, over as hell as a face. Over as hell as a heel. He was hated as a heel, but loved as a face. And the man was over enough, he was supposed to have a feud with Hulk Hogan. Got taken away because Hogan didn't think it was worth it. But, my God, Jake Roberts was fantastic. Never won a championship in WCW. Never won a championship in the WWF. Heel in both. But he was so good. You can go back to Sting, his feud with Sting, when they had their match at Halloween Havoc. Just like what I think was the Iron Glove match or whatever. The promos he was cutting, the darkness that surrounded him with Vader and others, it was just brilliant. Brilliant stuff, I'm telling you. It sucked that he didn't win more. It sucked that he didn't get over more as a face, or even as a heel, but I don't know. Jake definitely, I think, is definitely better than the ones I've named previously on this list. Not quite as, you can't say in-ring work, but just from accolades and stuff from 5 on, but Jake the Snake Roberts no doubt deserves to be on this list. Moving on to number 5. This guy, all I can really say, let him in. The Fiend, Bray Wyatt. You can look at him with this Fiend gimmick, or you can even go back to the Bayou with Bray Wyatt when he was toting his lantern with the Wyatt family. This man, no matter what you gave him under the character, under the guise of being Bray Wyatt, he has managed to somehow make it work and make it creepy. He's great at this. He really, really is. And personally, I have since the Fiend. Let's start specifically with the Fiend character, because he's been much more, well, there's been hiccups. But he's been much more well taken care of as the Fiend versus when he was just Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt always talked a great game, but never really got over. But him just as the Fiend, right? He has managed to reinvent his character. I remember last year seeing those little vignettes, starting with Mercy the Buzzard, being like, what the fuck is this? And then Abby the Witch. And I'm just, what is this shit? And then you see him with them in the Firefly Funhouse, and you're like, what is this? And I know, repetitive, but that's what I kept asking myself is, what is this? And it was just, you had like that creepy Mr. Rogers vibe. And honestly, that's what you thought you were going to get. You thought you were going to get creepy Mr. Rogers in the ring. He'd be all, ha ha, and he'd get in the ring and he'd destroy you. But then he started teasing him. And you're like, him? Who's him? And then you saw those first flashes of the Fiend, and you're just like, oh. And then the moment you saw the Fiend in person for the first time, and you saw the flashing lights and that music, and he took out Finn Balor, you're like, whoa, this is fucking cool. And then he had the match at SummerSlam, and you're like, damn, this guy's got to be pushed. But then they did. Straight to hell, inside Hell in a Cell. And then you had that little hiccup. But then they made up for it. And then they killed him again with Goldberg back in February. But they've done really well since then, I think, of rebuilding the character. I'm okay with him losing to Roman Reigns at Clash of Champions in the Triple Threat. Or, sorry, not at Clash, but Payback. I'm honestly okay with that. Because Roman needed this championship. No doubt. That Universal title belonged to him. But as the Fiend, he managed to become the Universal Champion twice. That character, albeit it's had its moments of being kind of fucked with a little bit, has still been a much better character and more successful and more dark. Like that he's like that multiple personality Mr. Rogers, but yet at the same time he tries to make it feel like the Fiend and Bray are separate entities, yet they're still one entity. It's creepy. And then you can go back to Bray Wyatt as just, hey man, walk around, we're here. That version of Bray Wyatt. The Bayou, beating up people Bray Wyatt. The Sister Abigail loving, Wyatt family leading Bray Wyatt. That character was also very exciting when he made his debut, but then they screwed that up with John Cena. So it always had a good creep factor. He was always able to talk, but it did lose its luster. So when he was able to transition into the Fiend, it was like, okay, I'm on board with this. I like this. Where's this going? Lead the way. Like, I was cool with it. I was legit cool with it. But I think I've gone on long enough about the Fiend. So, I'm going to move on to number 4. This is another character who has had a long history with the company. One of the most recognizable names in the Attitude Era. And he's had longevity. You don't see him much now, but it's Mayor Kane, Mayor Glenn Jacobs. It's Kane. It's gotta be Kane. Kane had to make this list, man. He's had so many different iterations. He's always managed, and he was a part of this company when they were still doing their supernatural elements, and they were still, Undertaker and Kane, the Brothers of Destruction, supernatural powers and all that stuff. He's old school like that, right? But Kane is he's managed, a guy who you probably didn't expect to last, he lasted the longest out of almost everyone on this list, especially in the WWE. Kane was a big man, but an agile man. He was very much like The Undertaker in that aspect. But I remember when I first started watching wrestling in 1998. One of the first clips I saw on Raw was what I thought was Kane. I didn't know it Kane at the time, but I remember we were switching between Nitro and Raw because my aunt watched both shows. But I remember flipping back and forth and seeing Vince McMahon in the ring with what I thought was Kane, but then you saw The Undertaker rip the mask off and it was Undertaker underneath the mask. But I was like, damn, this dude's a big presence. But even going back and rewatching Bad Blood, from the moment he was introduced, with the mask and, the burnt face, and he just had to cover his body because he could have been burnt, but then it transitions into a more psychological scarring. Something about Kane was always creepy. Like, he legit was creepy. The one messed up eye, you only saw his eyes. He never spoke. He was just almost inevitable. It was inevitable that he was going to terrorize you. He was going to beat you. Even The Undertaker at WrestleMania 14 could not take this man down. He barely beat him. Kane, when he initially came in, those first, probably up till he joined up with X-Pac and DX, which was fine. I was a fan of it. Then he started getting a little cheesy. Maybe even a little bit before that with the whole China thing. He was always much more interesting, much more, how would I put this? He was just an intimidating presence. Like, you were legit scared of this man. And then after that, he went back to being kind of dark. Like, I loved the Kane character. And he won championships. He beat Austin in a First Blood match. The thought of, man, this guy could be lit on fire, to becoming the WWE World Heavyweight Champion, like Tag Team Champion, Intercontinental Champion, Hardcore Champion. Like, Kane as not just the character, the dark, scary character. He was always able to reinvent himself and able to win championships. Like, the man was over, like Rover. He was. And I remember Kane started, in 2002, kind of became a little bit of a, I'm a bit of a silly character. I'm doing spinneroonies with Booker T. He had a good little tag team run with RVD. It was nice, but Kane didn't feel like Kane. And then they decided to take the mask off, right? And I remember that was a big moment. Madison Square Garden, June 2003. And it was, or was it July? It was Raw 2003, Madison Square Garden, lost the World Heavyweight title match to Triple H. You swore. He's like, no way they're taking off Kane's mask. And then they did. And they reinvented his character. Where it's like, oh, it's not physical, it's mental. Which made it much more scary because you didn't know what was going on in here. And at first, Kane was conflicted. Is he still a face? Is he bad? I can remember seeing them having him come out with the red and orange lighting and wearing the cuffs. I can remember WrestleMania 14, which was at Madison Square Garden, when he came out and the whole city of New York on fire. Just the way that he was presented in this character. He was so aggressive, and he was back to being like almost unbeatable, right? I loved it. And of course, then that became stale. And then he came back with a mask again. But he came out with like that welder's mask over the other mask. And you're like, what the hell? He was creepy again. And eventually that wore off. But no matter what, Kane was able to reinvent himself. Somehow, some way. Remember Kane and the Authority. Like, that was silly. But it was Kane, and he put the mask back on and became that scary presence again. Like, it just kept going back and forth. But Kane, as a character, has always managed to reinvent and kind of stay relevant. It was always interesting. But now, I never want to see Kane again. If I'm being honest, I never want to see Kane again. So, it is what it is. Jumping to number 3. And now I know from 4, maybe even 5 down, hell, so there's going to be people who are going to argue with this list. And there's going to be someone who's going to say this next one should be higher than the one who's going to follow it. They even maybe Fiend and the other one should be higher. But hey, it's my list. You can always put your list down in the description below. Or down in the comments. I would love to hear your opinions. But my number 3, I think this is a great position for this man. Mankind. Yes, most people remember Mankind for Mr. Sacco and all of that. You know, Rock, This Is Your Life. That's what a lot of people remember Mankind for. But let's not forget that when Mankind initially came in, he was a very, very dark character. He was not lovable McFoley. He was dark, mentally twisted, loved pain. He thrived off of pain. That is what he wanted. It's what he lived for. But this version of McFoley was vile. He was vicious. Pulling his hair out, aligned with Paul Bearer, taking on The Undertaker in the Buried Alive match, right? Having the grueling battle in Madison Square Garden at the Survivor Series in 96. He took what was the best element of Cactus Jack, the brutality, and he morphed it. Now, the Mankind gimmick was, I guess, a lot of people expected Mick Foley to come in as Cactus Jack, but see him as Mankind became probably his most successful version of the Foley characters. But yes, he became lovable, he became fun, but you still always had that edge where he could always go to that level of violence. But I just remember watching those early versions, him and Shawn Michaels, right? At Mind Games in your house. Probably one of the best title matches during that first run with Shawn Michaels as champion. It ended in DQ, and that's fine, but it was really good. It was interesting. And I'm not going to lie, it kind of sucked when he became less fun. But that was also around the time I was watching. And that was a long transition. So, but I do feel like that Mankind, as a creepy character, deserved to be here. I'm going to jump to number 2. Now here's where some people aren't going to agree with me. And that's okay. That is okay, because this man, yes, has had some silly feuds. But no doubt, if you want to talk creepy characters, yeah, he should be here. And people are going to say, he's just a Kane ripoff. That's your opinion. But, yeah, you're probably right. But, number 2, I'm going with Abyss of TNA fame. Yes, Abyss. I know. I hear it in the comments. People are mad. And that's okay. But you cannot look back at creepy, supernatural-like characters and not want this man on this list. In TNA, yes, you could say he was their Kane. You could say that. And that would be fair, okay? That'd be fair, and I probably wouldn't be mad at you. But I'm sorry, I just saw a weird line on my screen. But he was such a good character. You know what I mean? Like, he was scary. He had the Monsters Ball gimmick. Like, he was he was actually more vicious than Kane was vicious when Abyss came around. And he's another guy who was able to transform himself into the Joseph Park character. So he became like dual personality. Now, a lot of people compared him to Kane. I thought he looked more like Mankind, personally. I guess differencing of opinions, right? And, you know, he'd become Joseph Park. And then he'd be back to being Abyss. And then him with the, what was it? I forgot the name of the team. But him with Crazy Steve and Rosemary. That whole thing. That was freaking great. That was an awesome thing. Oh, Decay. That was it. Decay. Him against the Hardys. The man was he was a dark character. And him with James Mitchell, the Sinister Minister, as his manager. Perfect pairing. I'll talk more about James Mitchell here in a few. But it was fantastic. It was a whole fantastic thing. I loved his character, and he won championships. He was in main events. Was he the guy? Absolutely not. And I'm aware and cognate enough to know he was never going to be the guy. I just know that. And that's okay. But I sound like I'm going over nothing here, but he had a lot of memorable feuds. Great matches with AJ Styles. Great matches with Jeff Jarrett. He had some duds. What was it, Revan or whatever his name was when they brought him in to be his brother? Obviously, that was supposed to be an Undertaker Kane ripoff. Got me there, but it didn't take away from Abyss and his character. Introducing the Monsters Ball, which is still used to this day in Impact /TNA / the Owl Network, whatever you want to fucking call it. So, that's number 2. Now, we still got to get to number 1. But, before I do that, I want to talk about some honorable mentions. Some honorable mentions, if you all don't mind. If you'll allow me. This is something I'm going to start doing from now on. But honorable mentions. These are some individuals who weren't quite good enough to crack this top 10, but I definitely believe they deserve to be at least recognized for a moment. So let's start with our first honorable mention. Gangrel. Come on now. The Brood. Who can't talk about Gangrel when you want to talk about dark characters? He had the fucking Brood, which had the coolest entrance music and one of the coolest entrances. He was a vampire. And the best part about it, this guy is still doing it today. Well, not now because, we got a pandemic, but he's still doing his thing, and I love it. I love Gangrel. You guys should find him on YouTube and check him out. He's interesting. Our next honorable mention, Ox Baker. Now, a lot of people don't know who Ox Baker is, but the guy spanned 3 decades, right? A 3-decade career. He actually had opponents fear him. This guy was super close to cracking the top 10. I had to pick between him and another person, but he used the heart punch, and some people actually said he ended the lives of 2 wrestlers in the ring using the heart punch. That's a scary thought, people. I'm just saying that's a scary thought. Speaking of Decay, Rosemary. Yes, Rosemary I am putting as an honorable mention here because everything I've seen of her when I started watching Impact Wrestling back in 2014, I always thought Rosemary was interesting. And I think she's only gotten better as a performer since then. Much more intriguing. The whole thing with her and Su Yung and Havoc. It's always been an interesting thing. And now you add Tyra Valkyrie into the whole mix. I love everything that Rosemary has been doing. And yes, I know not a lot of people agree with this, but I loved Vampiro in the WCW. The guy was great in Mexico, was very underutilized in WCW. The guy was athletic. Yes, he was not the greatest built man, but his gimmick, the painted face, then he had the whole Dark Carnival thing, you know, bringing in the Great Muta and being tag team partners with him and whatever their fucking names were. I don't remember. WCW in the 2000s. Weird time. But damn, Vampiro was a good wrestler. I think if Vampiro could have made it to WCW earlier, the guy probably would have been United States champion, possibly even thrown into the world title picture. I honestly believe that. And he was. He had a very creepy gimmick. And my final honorable mention, James Mitchell, the Sinister Minister. He's a manager, but my God, is he not fucking the greatest at this? You give the guy shit, he'll turn it into gold. From ECW to TNA, the man was phenomenal. Everywhere I've seen the man be a manager, he's great. Abyss. He's been Abyss's manager. He was with freaking Tajiri and Mikey Whipwreck. He knows how to manage. He knows how to manage champions. And he's a great talker. If you put him on the list of possibly great managers / talkers, you'd have him and Paul Heyman at 1 and 2. Or 1A, 1B, if you want to talk about talkers. That's just honestly how I feel about it. Personally. Honestly. But that's my honorable mentions. So here we are. We're to the final, the number one. And this will probably come as no surprise to most people. Honestly. This will probably come as no surprise. But I can't leave him out. So let's just get to it, right? It's the Phenom. It's the American Badass. Booger Red. Big Evil. It's the Undertaker. The Dead Man. That hurt my throat. Obviously, the Undertaker is number one. Longevity. Championships. Accolades. Gimmick. The man had it all. Had it all. WWE champion. Tag team champion. I mean, Royal Rumble winner. Main event of WrestleMania. And he was one of the, first, he was a gimmick that was meant for one time period, but was able to transcend. Much like Kane, he was able to adapt. He was able to change and adapt. Yeah, adapt. I said it twice. But he's able to change. He was able to keep up. The Undertaker is, without a doubt, to me, still one of my favorite characters ever. Again, I don't need to see him anymore. But even as early as, or even as late as this year, he was able to evolve his character. He was a little bit of American Badass, a little bit of the Dead Man, and a little bit Mark Calloway. And he was able to put on probably the best WrestleMania match all week with AJ Styles at WrestleMania this year. Now I think he'll probably come back for next year's WrestleMania because he's gonna want that one last match in front of a crowd. I can almost see it, but it is what it is. The Undertaker is great. From that first time you saw him with Brother Love, Ted DiBiase bringing him, Brother Love being his manager, to the union of Paul Bearer and himself, Undertaker has been, without a doubt, one of the best performers, entertainers. He's not a great wrestler, but he's able to evolve, and he's great. I love The Undertaker. He's been fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. But that's I don't have to go on and on about The Undertaker. You all know who The Undertaker is. No one has to tell you guys. You guys know. But let me hear your guys' list, right? I want to hear your guys' list. You all tell me. But I'd like to thank all of you guys. I'd like to thank you guys for coming in, checking out this video. I'm sure I'll say this again tomorrow on Halloween. But thank you guys for all the support this month. Everyone who's come in and viewed the videos. Everyone who's left a comment. Everyone who's liked this stuff. Thank you. I ask you one more favor. Follow us on all our show's social media at both Twitter, Instagram, and even Facebook. YoBroGaming1 on Twitter. Zachary SB84 on Snapchat. It's kind of my personal Snapchat. I occasionally post stuff there. And if you guys want to get video links more often, notifications, Facebook at YoBroNation on Facebook. All the links, of course, down in the description below. You guys can go check out some other channels I have linked down there. You guys can go to our StreamLabs if you want to donate. We do have a Patreon, patreon.com/YoBroNation. You guys can go check that. That's in the link down below if you want to help support the channel. But you can also support the channel by simply liking, sharing, and subscribing to this channel. So if you're not a subscriber and you're here and you like what you saw, or you just want to sit and have a laugh for 40 minutes at my expense, by all means, go ahead, like, share, and again, subscribe to the channel. Of course, I'm Zach with the YoBro Nation, and y'all have a fantastic Halloween. Stay safe, everyone, and remember to join the nation. Good night.